Hello world. So let's talk about electronics recycling. I'm sure most people would see all this stuff and just throw it out. But if you know how to work electronics, there's a lot of valuable things here. So before we get into all this, let's talk about the tools. This right here is digital multimeter, useful for looking at voltages, resistances, connectivities, as well as amperages. This guy is a heat gun, perfect for desoldering really quickly a lot of components. Our soldering iron, of course. This pick is useful for pushing out through-hole wires and scraping off components. The tweezers, of course, great for picking up things. And this is an insulated little metal screwdriver. This is important because on circuit boards like this, you have things like capacitors, and capacitors can still hold a charge even after there's no power. So this is important when you're tearing off capacitors, so you can short all the different capacitor leads, and that way you don't get shocked. Also, I forgot to mention this right here, pretty important for electronics recycling. It's a solder sucker, so it sucks up the solder once you have it melted. So let's take a quick tour of what all these components are. These guys are capacitors, of course. They store up charge. They're useful for filtering signals or even powering things. Down here we got these little guys, resistors, of course, and then sometimes, like this one, is probably an inductor. And then these little glass ones, focus. These little glass ones right here are diodes, which only allow current to pass one way through them. We have some more capacitors, even more capacitors, more capacitors. We have integrated circuits. Now, these little tiny ICs can be anything from timers to operational amplifiers, any number of things, and usually you'll have to look up the part code and see what it is. But once you find the data sheet, you should have a pinout of what each of the different pins does, and sometimes they're useful, sometimes they're not. Let's see, what else do we have on here? This board has an old school vacuum tube. Now these aren't really that useful for electronics projects anymore, but they're really cool for some sort of steampunk style art piece. Let's see, we also have these guys, these LMs. These are probably voltage regulators, but I'd have to look up to make sure. Let's see, over here, these glass tubes with a little wire in them. These are fuses. They're designed to burn out in case they overcurrent. And let's move on to another board. Now, if you have just a normal printer, usually this is the valuable thing to get out of it. What this guy is right here is a little, 4-wire, 5-wire stepper motor. You can see on the other side, the stepper motor drives the gears drive the belt, and usually you'll have your print head on here. So we can actually take this stepper motor off and use our own microcontroller and use it to move something else. Whenever you're scavenging from just an inkjet printer, this is usually the thing you go for. Let's see. This board came from an old receiver. So on here we have a bunch of great interfaces. These are little slides, potentiometers. We got some radial potentiometers here, twisties. We got some cool push buttons. We got some little LED blinking lights. Of course, we got a bunch more capacitors. This guy right here is a little transistor. They have 3 wires. Transistors you can use as electrical switches, so you can control a different voltage with your microcontroller or something. More buttons. This I think is a 1/4 inch jack, which might be useful for a microphone or something. Here's another board from the same receiver. You can see we got some more capacitors in here. We got a ton of different filtering capacitors all throughout here. But what I'm really interested in this one is these guys. These guys are just the barrel jacks that normally you plug the speaker wire into. But if you take these off, you can actually put them into an old computer power supply, and you can get your 12 volt, you can get your 5 volt, and you can have nice barrel jack interfaces for a benchtop power supply. Similar to this guy over here, these barrel jacks right here. But you can easily recycle with a few barrel jacks and an old computer power supply and make a relatively simple benchtop power supply. Let's see, we also have some RCA jacks. Anything else interesting on this? Some wires, some more fuses, another 1/4 inch plug. For tomorrow's video, I'll have a fast forward of me recycling these circuit boards. So if you want to follow along, feel free to subscribe, and thanks for tuning in.